There's something wrong with this case. I can feel it in my bones. The evidence, it doesn't fit. The numbers look polished, too polished. The testimonies feel rehearsed. The prosecution claims the data is irrefutable, but I've seen enough to know when something is amiss. I watch as Holmes flips through stacks of reports, his eyes moving at an unnatural speed, absorbing every word. The glow of the fire barely reaches his face, but I can see the sharpness in his gaze. He knows it too. Surveys with missing respondents, witness statements that contradict the statistics, and the expert testimony, conveniently aligned with the side that benefits the most. It's as if the truth has been rewritten, replaced with something more presentable, more profitable. I pace the room, glancing at the crime scene sketches pinned to the wall, at the case notes scattered across the table. The air is thick with unspoken revelations. How many cases have been lost to bad data? How many verdicts swayed by numbers that tell the wrong story? The law depends on facts, on proof. But what happens when the proof itself is a lie? Holmes exhales, finally looking up at me, his lips curling into that knowing smirk. He's already solved it, but he won't say a word. Not yet. He wants me to see it first. Damn it, Holmes. What have we uncovered? I sit by the fire, a cup of tea in my hands, watching Holmes work. His focus is almost otherworldly. Papers litter the desk, charts and graphs half unfurled, yet there's a method to his chaos. I know better than to disturb him when he's like this. It always begins the same way with Holmes. The room is quiet, save for the crackle of the fire and the occasional rustle of paper. I watch him, his mind ticking like clockwork. He said it before. Data collection, Watson, is the bedrock of reason. Without it, there is no case, no truth, only speculation. And so here we are, surrounded by the fragments of something larger, something that only Holmes seems to see clearly. He leans back for a moment, his eyes scanning a report with the intensity of a hawk. I can't help but wonder what he sees that I don't. He doesn't rush. That's the thing about Holmes. To him, collecting information is an art, a science, and a responsibility. I hear his voice in my mind reminding me, we don't just gather data, Watson. We protect it, respect it. A flawed foundation crumbles under scrutiny, and so does the case. Ethics, privacy, informed consent. He holds these principles as tightly as he holds his magnifying glass. I sip my tea, thinking about the broader implications, the way Holmes dissects information, surveys, interviews, evidence. It's more than just a process, it's a philosophy, a belief that the truth can only emerge when we gather every relevant piece with care and precision. It's remarkable, really. To him, data isn't just a collection of facts, it's a living, breathing narrative waiting to be understood. He once told me, each piece of information is a brushstroke, Watson. Together, they form a portrait. And only when the portrait is complete can we see the truth. Holmes sets down one report and picks up another, his expression unchanged but his movements deliberate. There's no chaos in his world, only patterns, patterns I have yet to fully understand. I wonder how many others fail to see the importance of this step. How many cases are built on shaky foundations because someone overlooked a key fact or ignored an ethical boundary. Holmes never does. To him, every detail matters, every rule must be upheld. It's why his conclusions are so unshakable. He doesn't just see the data, he sees the meaning beneath it. I let out a small sigh, setting my tea aside. Holmes doesn't look up, but I know he's aware. He always is. This is where the real work begins. Not in the courtroom, not in the confrontation, but here, in the quiet pursuit of clarity. And so, I watch him. Because if there's one thing I've learned from Sherlock Holmes, it's that the truth demands patience, precision, and above all else, integrity. I stand by the window, the rain streaking down the glass, my mind wandering as I observe Holmes at his desk. He's surrounded by papers, graphs, and books, yet his focus never wavers. I can tell he's categorizing something, organizing the chaos into neat, logical compartments. It's a strange thing to watch Holmes work. Where I see a blur of numbers and words, he sees structure, patterns, meaning. Today, it's data he's dissecting. He once told me, "Watson, not all data is created equal. Each type tells a different story. If we fail to recognize that, we might as well chase shadows." Holmes pulls out a piece of paper and begins jotting something down in his precise handwriting. I can almost hear his voice explaining it to me, though he hasn't said a word. Categorical data. That's what he's starting with. Characteristics, traits that label but don't measure. Gender, language, case types, things that seem straightforward, but Holmes always warns me to tread carefully with them. Labels can be deceptive, Watson. They tell us what something is, but never why it matters. He shifts to another page, nodding slightly as if confirming a thought. Then there's nominal data. Distinct categories without order or rank. Legal cases. Civil, criminal, administrative. Holmes likes to remind me that while these categories seem rigid, the context can change everything. Reordering doesn't alter their meaning, Watson, he once said, but how they're used, now that's where the truth lies. I notice him glance at a bar chart, his pen tapping lightly against the desk. Ordinal data now. Ordered units, ranked but without precise measurement. Satisfaction ratings, survey responses. I recall him lecturing me on this once. Ordinal data is like an opinion, Watson. It tells you the direction of the wind, but never its strength. I smile at the memory. Holmes pauses for a moment, leaning back in his chair before turning his attention to a spreadsheet. Numerical data, numbers that can be counted, measured, or compared. The cases filed in a court, the number of witnesses called, the days between hearings. This is the hard evidence, he'd say. But even hard evidence can bend under the weight of interpretation. Use it wisely. Finally, he studies a graph, one hand on his chin, the other tracing invisible lines in the air. Continuous data. Measurements with infinite possibilities. Heights, distances, time. Holmes once told me, "Continuous data reveals the shape of a story, Watson. It shows how something changes, how it breathes." It's strange to think of numbers as living things, but with Holmes, everything seems alive in some way. I return to my chair, watching him, trying to absorb his method. It's fascinating, really. To Holmes, each type of data is a clue. Not all clues are equal, and not all are obvious, but together they paint a picture. He has a way of seeing their relationships, their hidden connections, a way of pulling them together into something coherent, something actionable. He finally looks up, his sharp eyes meeting mine for the briefest moment. He doesn't speak, but I know what he's thinking. The data is falling into place, and the story is beginning to reveal itself. I wonder if I'll ever see it the way he does. For now, I'm content to watch and learn. Data, he says, is the foundation of truth, and the truth, as always, is what we seek. The morning sunlight spills into the room, glinting off Holmes's cluttered desk. He's at it again, poring over documents and scribbling notes in his unmistakable shorthand. I've grown accustomed to this sight, yet it never fails to impress me. There's a kind of rhythm to his work, a meticulous dance between observation and deduction. Holmes once said, "Data collection is where the story begins, Watson. It's the ink on the page, the framework on which everything else is built." I hadn't thought much of it at the time. To me, data was just facts, numbers, but now watching him, I see that it's so much more than that. I glance at the stack of papers beside him filled with charts, case notes, and lists of questions. He's gathering evidence, methodically piecing together fragments of truth. He begins with definition, of course. He always does. Data collection, he told me once, is a systematic process. It's not just gathering information, it's gathering the right information. Information that answers the questions we ask and the ones we haven't thought to ask yet. He uses both quantitative methods, surveys, experiments, and qualitative ones, interviews, case studies. To him, it's about balance, about knowing when to rely on numbers and when to trust human insight. Holmes pauses, lifting his gaze toward the ceiling, deep in thought. I know this look. He's about to make a breakthrough. And yet it's not just the data itself that matters, it's what you do with it. Holmes calls it validating hypotheses. He once explained it to me like this. When we collect data, Watson, we're not just proving theories, we're testing them, seeing if they hold up under scrutiny. A hypothesis is only as strong as the evidence that supports it. It's a principle I've seen him live by time and time again. I watch as he flips to another page, this one filled with performance metrics and trend graphs. He examines them closely, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Trends and patterns, that's what he's looking for now. He told me once that data has a way of revealing itself over time. By analyzing patterns, we can understand what's working and what isn't. We can monitor progress and adjust course when necessary. Without data, Watson, we're flying blind. It's a perspective that's grown on me, though I doubt I'll ever see the world quite as clearly as he does. Holmes suddenly sets his pen down, reaching for another document. His movements are precise, deliberate, almost mechanical, yet there's an energy to them, a sense of purpose. There's one more thing he values above all else, decision-making. Data, he says, provides the foundation for informed choices. The difference between a guess and a solution, he told me, is evidence. Watching him now, I see that every choice he makes, every conclusion he draws, is grounded in this principle. There's no room for guesswork in his world. I lean back in my chair, watching him work, and I can't help but feel a sense of awe. What seems like chaos to others is, to Holmes, a map, a guide to the truth. It's not just about solving a case, it's about understanding, about knowing that the smallest detail, the faintest clue, could hold the key to everything. That's what data collection means to Holmes, and though I may never see it as he does, I've come to realize its importance. Without it, we're lost. With it, we have a chance. The air in 221B Baker Street feels heavier today, weighed down by the stacks of books and case files that now occupy every available surface. Holmes is buried in a pile of ancient legal texts, his sharp eyes scanning line after line with an intensity that borders on obsession. I sit across from him, my notebook open. Though I've written nothing, I'm too preoccupied watching him work. Holmes has a peculiar relationship with tradition. While he thrives on innovation, there are times when the old methods serve him best. I've learned this over the years, watching him dive into the archives and libraries with a fervor I can only describe as reverence. I glance at the musty books that surround him, their leather covers worn with age. He pulls one closer, flipping to a bookmark page. Library research. To most, it's a tedious chore, a relic of a bygone era. But to Holmes, it's a treasure trove of untapped knowledge. He's always told me, the answers we seek are often hidden in plain sight, Watson. A dusty volume, a forgotten case. These can hold the keys to unraveling the most perplexing mysteries. He uses textbooks for context, journals for deep analysis, and court reports to unearth legal precedents. To him, it's not about the medium, it's about the depth of understanding it provides. I watch as he sets the book aside and retrieves a folder filled with typed notes. He nods slightly as he reads, as though confirming a theory. Then there's participation. Holmes has a knack for engaging with the right people at the right time. Judges, scholars, practitioners. He seeks their insights not out of necessity, but out of respect. He often attends lectures, seminars, even conferences, though I suspect it's as much to observe the speakers as it is to learn from them. You see, Watson, he once said, a conversation with an expert can illuminate what even the best books cannot. He's also embraced modern tools, video conferencing and televised events. Accessibility, he says, is no longer a barrier to knowledge. Holmes pauses, tapping his fingers on the desk before glancing at me. It's a fleeting look, one that says, "Pay attention, Watson." He doesn't need to speak for me to hear his thoughts. Of course, there's doctrinal legal research. This is where Holmes truly shines. He immerses himself in legal theories and principles, unraveling the frameworks that govern cases like threads in a tapestry. To him, it's not enough to know the laws. You must understand their intent, their history, their evolution. The law is a living thing, Watson, he told me once, and like all living things, it must be studied with care and precision. Watching him now, I see the truth of that statement. I close my notebook, realizing there's nothing I could write that would capture what I'm witnessing. Holmes doesn't just research, he investigates, interrogates, analyzes. Every book, every conversation, every precedent is a clue in his relentless pursuit of the truth. It's remarkable, really. While others might scoff at the traditional tools of data collection, Holmes embraces them. He doesn't see them as outdated relics, he sees them as the foundations upon which modern methods are built. And in his hands, even the oldest tools become instruments of discovery. As the afternoon light fades, Holmes continues his work, unbothered by the passing of time. I watch him, my admiration growing with each passing moment. The truth, I realize, isn't just in the tools, it's in how you use them, and no one uses them quite like Sherlock Holmes. The room is quieter than usual, though Holmes is no less active. His desk is a fortress of books, papers, and folders. To the untrained eye, it looks like chaos, but I've been around him long enough to know better. Every piece has its place. Every source, a purpose. Holmes has always been a man of methods. No detail too small, no avenue unexplored. Today, his focus is on doctrinal legal research, a process that, I'll admit, I never quite appreciated until I saw it through his eyes. He pulls a thick textbook from the stack, its pages creased with years of use. He flips through it, his eyes scanning each line with unwavering precision. Library research, it seems so simple, so straightforward, and yet in Holmes's hands it becomes an art. He doesn't just read, he excavates, unearths hidden meanings buried in the text. Textbooks give him context. Law reviews provide in-depth analyses, and case reporters are his compass, guiding him through the labyrinth of precedents. He once told me, "Every precedent, Watson, is a breadcrumb. Follow them carefully and you'll find the truth." Watching him now, I can see how deeply he believes that. Holmes sets the book down and reaches for his notebook, jotting down a series of words and symbols. I recognize them as keywords, his way of navigating the endless sea of information. Effective library use, he calls it. To him, it's not just about finding the right book or article, it's about knowing how to look, identifying relevant keywords, mastering indexes and catalogs, understanding how to sort through the noise to find what truly matters. It's a skill he's honed to perfection, and one he seems determined to teach me whether I like it or not. I watch as he picks up another document, this one printed from an online database. He smirks slightly as if impressed by what he's found. Ah, electronic resources. This is where Holmes merges the old with the new. Online libraries, advanced search functions, these are tools he's embraced wholeheartedly. The digital world, Watson, he told me once, is not a replacement for tradition. It's an extension of it. Together, they allow us to see further, dig deeper, and act faster. He uses these tools with the same care and precision as he does a magnifying glass, knowing that speed means nothing without accuracy. He pauses for a moment, leaning back in his chair as if reflecting on something. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, he reaches for another stack of papers. Participation. It's not enough for Holmes to sit behind his desk. He thrives on engagement. Lectures, seminars, conferences, he immerses himself in them, not just as a student, but as an observer. He watches the speakers, studies their arguments, questions their assumptions, even in modern settings, through video conferences or televised debates, he's able to glean insights others might overlook. "The world is full of experts, Watson," he said once, "but few are worth listening to. Find those who are, and you'll find answers others miss." I sit back in my chair, observing the controlled chaos of his process. There's a beauty to it, a kind of disciplined curiosity that drives him to explore every avenue, every possibility. This is Holmes at his finest, delving into the doctrinal, navigating the traditional, merging it with the modern. To most, it might seem tedious, even dull. But to Holmes, it's exhilarating. It's the foundation of his brilliance, the secret to his success, and as I watch him work, I can't help but feel a sense of awe. It's late afternoon, and the golden light of the setting sun streams through the windows of 221B Baker Street. Holmes is at it again, deeply immersed in a peculiar mix of documents. I sit in my usual chair, watching him, as always, trying to understand his process. Holmes often says that facts are stubborn things, but what he really means is that you can't always take them at face value. You have to observe them, question them, sometimes even chase them down. Today, he's working through empirical research techniques, tools to not just gather evidence, but to understand it deeply. He picks up a report and leans forward, his piercing gaze focused on the contents. I can see him sifting through layers of meaning, separating the noise from the signal. Observation. That's always where he starts. Holmes has a gift for seeing what others miss. Whether it's a courtroom interaction, the behavior of a suspect during an arrest, or even the body language of a witness, he studies it all. "Direct observation, Watson," he told me once, "is a window into the truth. But be careful. It's not just what you see. It's how you interpret it." He categorizes his approach meticulously: participating, quasi-participating, and non-participating. To Holmes, even the smallest detail can speak volumes if you know how to listen. He sets the report aside and reaches for a transcript, his pen moving swiftly across the paper as he underlines key phrases. Then there are interviews. Holmes treats every conversation like a puzzle, every word a piece to be placed just so. Diagnostic interviews to uncover problems, treatment interviews to explore solutions, and research interviews to understand broader phenomena. He's not just asking questions, he's peeling back layers, uncovering truths hidden beneath the surface. I've seen him do it countless times, and yet it never fails to astonish me. Holmes pauses, his gaze falling on a stack of questionnaires. He picks one up, examining it with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a rare gem. "Ah, the infamous questionnaire. To most, it's a simple tool, a way to collect opinions or data, but to Holmes, it's a double-edged sword. A poorly designed questionnaire, Watson," he told me once, "is worse than no data at all. It misleads, manipulates, and obscures the truth." He values efficiency, yes, and the anonymity that encourages honesty, but he also knows the dangers of limited depth and low response rates. He's careful with these tools, knowing their power to both reveal and distort. Holmes suddenly rises, pacing the room as he reads aloud from a case study. His voice is steady, deliberate, each word chosen with care. Case studies. These are where Holmes truly thrives. He dives into the complexities of a single unit, an individual, a group, a court decision, seeking to understand it fully. He draws from internal sources, documents, records, evidence, and external ones, interviews, observations, and always, always he emphasizes triangulation. Multiple methods, Watson, he once said. That's how we ensure credibility. That's how we find the truth. Watching him now, I see that principle in action. I sip my tea, marveling at his dedication. He isn't just collecting information, he's constructing a narrative, piece by piece, method by method. It's fascinating to watch. Holmes doesn't treat empirical techniques as tools, they're extensions of his mind, ways to reach beyond the obvious and into the profound. Whether it's observation, interviews, questionnaires, or case studies, he uses each method with purpose, precision, and an almost unsettling clarity. As the sun sets and the room darkens, Holmes doesn't pause. He's in his element, and I, as always, am content to observe. There's a brilliance to his work, a method to his madness, and as I watch him, I realize something. Empirical research isn't just about gathering evidence, it's about understanding the human element within it, and no one understands that better than Sherlock Holmes. The streets of London hum faintly in the background, but the sound is muted here in the study. Holmes is standing by the window, staring out at nothing in particular, or so it seems. I know better. When Holmes is still like this, his mind is anything but. Holmes once told me that the greatest truths often reveal themselves in silence. I didn't understand it at the time, but now, as I watch him, I see what he meant. Observation, he calls it, a cornerstone of his method. To the untrained eye, it's simple. You look, you see. But with Holmes, it's something much more profound. He steps back from the window and paces, his hands clasped behind his back. I can see his mind working, processing, analyzing. Observation to him is not passive, it's active, intentional, almost surgical. He's explained it to me many times. Observation, Watson, he said, is the most honest form of data collection. It doesn't rely on words or assumptions. It's raw, unfiltered, and unshaped by bias, provided you know how to interpret it. He distinguishes between three types: participating, quasi-participating, and non-participating. Each, he says, has its place, its strengths, and weaknesses. I recall the countless times I've seen him use these techniques. Participating observation, when he immerses himself completely, blending into the scene, becoming part of the environment. Like the time he posed as a dock worker to observe the dynamics of a smuggling operation. You learn their truths by living their lives, he said, his voice steady with conviction. Then there's quasi-participating observation. This is when Holmes keeps one foot in and one foot out, enough involvement to gain insight, but enough distance to maintain objectivity. He used it during a courtroom investigation, engaging just enough with the clerks to gather the information he needed without compromising his perspective. Holmes sits down now, flipping through a notebook filled with sketches and notes, each one a snapshot of his non-participating observations. He often watches from afar, silent and unnoticed, taking in the subtleties that others miss. Non-participating observation, he calls it. To most, it might seem the safest, the most objective, but Holmes would argue otherwise. Objectivity, Watson, he said once, is not just about distance. It's about understanding what you see and knowing what it means. Without interpretation, even the clearest observation is worthless. He knows its limits, how it can miss the nuances of interaction or intention, but he also knows when it's the right tool for the job. I watch as he pauses on a page, his finger tracing a particular note. He's recalling something, piecing it together, finding the connection. Observation has always been Holmes's greatest strength, his sharpest tool. Whether he's watching a courtroom interaction, analyzing the behavior of police officers during an arrest, or studying the flow of a crowd at a crime scene, he does so with an unmatched intensity. To him, every glance, every movement, every silence is a clue, a thread in the tapestry of truth. I sip my tea, marveling at his ability to see what others cannot. Where I see chaos, he sees patterns. Where I see noise, he hears meaning. It's not just about what he observes, though. It's about how he applies it. Observation is only as valuable as its interpretation, he says. And Holmes interprets better than anyone I've ever known. It's why he succeeds where others fail, why his conclusions are so often unshakable. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, Holmes finally sets down his notebook and looks at me, a faint smirk on his face. He doesn't say a word, but he doesn't need to. I know what he's thinking. The observation is complete, and the next step is about to begin. I may never see the world the way Holmes does, but I've come to understand this much. To observe is to learn. To learn is to understand. And to understand, as Holmes would say, is to be one step closer to the truth. Holmes is seated in his usual spot, his chair angled toward the fire. His hands rest on a small stack of papers, and I can see him studying the transcripts with that laser-sharp focus that always makes me feel as though I'm missing something obvious. I sit nearby, trying to make sense of it all. Interviews. At first glance, they seem simple enough, a conversation, a few questions, and some notes to take away. But with Holmes, nothing is ever that straightforward. To him, an interview is a battlefield, a duel of words and wits where every question is a weapon and every answer is a clue. Watching him work, I realize how little I truly understand about this particular art. Holmes picks up one transcript and taps it lightly against the desk. I know that look. He's categorizing, sorting the pieces of the puzzle in his mind. He's explained it to me before, breaking interviews down into classifications, by objective, for instance. Diagnostic interviews are used to uncover problems, to identify what's gone wrong and why. Holmes excels at these, peeling back the layers of a witness's story until he finds the truth hidden beneath. Then there are treatment interviews, which focus on solutions, rehabilitation, strategy, fixing what's broken. Finally, research interviews, which Holmes uses to explore larger patterns and phenomena. These, he once said, are like looking at the stars. You don't just see the light. You see the constellations. He sets down the first transcript and picks up another, his pen poised to underline key phrases. By methodology, the lines become even clearer. Focused interviews are his favorite, a structured approach with room for follow-ups, allowing him to adapt without losing control of the conversation. Directed interviews, on the other hand, are rigid, almost clinical, designed to elicit specific information. Holmes tolerates these but finds them limiting. And then there are non-directed interviews where the interviewee guides the conversation. These are rare for him, but when used, they reveal truths that might otherwise remain buried. Sometimes, Watson, he said once, letting someone talk freely is the fastest way to hear what they're afraid to say. Holmes pauses to rub his temple, his gaze flicking to a third document. His fingers drum against the arm of his chair. By interviewee, the classifications shift yet again. Individual interviews, one-on-one exchanges, are where Holmes truly shines. There is something almost surgical about the way he dissects each word, each hesitation, each glance. Group interviews, however, are an entirely different game. He once likened them to playing chess with 5 opponents at once, chaotic, complex, but endlessly revealing if you know where to look. I notice his expression change slightly as he picks up the final document, one marked with dates and times scrawled in his hand. Frequency adds yet another layer. Repeated interviews conducted over time allow Holmes to track changes, attitudes shifting, memories sharpening or fading. People lie, Watson, he told me once, but their lies change. Watch them closely enough, and you'll see the truth hidden in the cracks. These, I think, are his favorite. They allow him to watch the evolution of a story, to see it unfold like a flower blooming in slow motion. I sit back, watching him as he works through each transcript, his pen moving with precision. There's an artistry to his method, a deliberate rhythm that I can't quite replicate, but never fail to admire. To most, an interview is just a conversation. To Holmes, it's a science, a game, and an exploration all rolled into one. He knows when to press, when to pause, when to let silence do the talking. And he knows that every word, every hesitation, every sigh can carry the weight of 100 truths. Holmes finally sets down the papers, his gaze meeting mine for the briefest moment. There's a flicker of something there, satisfaction perhaps, or maybe just certainty. Whatever it is, I know one thing: he's closer to the truth than ever. Watching him, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever see the world as he does. For now, I'll settle for being the observer, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when Holmes conducts an interview, he doesn't just gather answers, he gathers meaning. And meaning, as he always says, is the beginning of the end game. The evening light filters through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Holmes is seated at his desk, his brow furrowed in concentration as he flips through a stack of papers. Among them are several questionnaires, some neatly filled in, others incomplete. I can see the faint trace of irritation on his face. It's rare, but unmistakable. Questionnaires. To most, they're nothing more than a set of questions scribbled on paper or typed into a form, but to Holmes, they're a tool, a bridge between raw data and deeper understanding. Yet, as I've come to learn, even the most useful tools have their limitations. I glance over at the pile of papers on his desk. Some of them are pristine, their responses clear and concise. Others are a mess, with questions half answered or ignored entirely. Holmes taps his pen against one of them as if trying to will it into revealing more than it does. He's often spoken of their advantages. Efficiency, for one. Questionnaires allow for the rapid collection of data from a large number of people. A well-designed questionnaire, Watson, he said once, is like a net cast wide. It captures much in a single sweep. Then there's anonymity, a factor Holmes values greatly. People are more likely to be honest when their identities are hidden. And standardization. This, he says, ensures uniformity, making it easier to compare responses and draw reliable conclusions. But I can see the frustration in his eyes as he picks up another incomplete form. Of course, he's equally aware of their disadvantages. Limited depth is the first. Questionnaires can only scrape the surface of complex issues. Holmes has likened them to a blunt instrument, effective for broad strokes, but ill-suited for finer details. And then there's the matter of low response rates. The data is only as valuable as the number of responses, he said once. And when people don't respond, Watson, it's like missing pieces in a puzzle. This, I suspect, is what irritates him most. Holmes leans back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. His mind is clearly working, dissecting the responses he does have, trying to make sense of the incomplete picture before him. And yet, despite their flaws, he understands their value. Questionnaires, he once told me, are a starting point, a way to gather the broad strokes before delving deeper with other methods. They're not the whole story, Watson, he said, but they give us the outline, and from there, we can fill in the gaps. I sip my tea, watching him as he works. There's a method to his process, even in the face of frustration. He's always careful to weigh the strengths and weaknesses of every tool, knowing that no single method can reveal the full truth. It's a lesson I've come to appreciate over time, that research, like detective work, is rarely straightforward. It requires patience, persistence, and the willingness to adapt. And Holmes, as always, embodies all three. The rain taps gently against the window pane, filling the room with a soft, rhythmic sound. Holmes sits hunched over his desk, a magnifying glass in one hand and a notebook in the other. Before him lies a collection of papers, court records, interview transcripts, and observational notes. I watch him, marveling at how deeply immersed he is in the material. Case studies. Holmes once described them to me as windows into complexity. They're not just about facts or patterns, they're about understanding the nuances, the unique characteristics that make each case stand apart. To him, they're more than research methods, they're stories waiting to be told. I observe as he carefully compares two documents, his keen eye catching details I'd surely overlook. He leans back, his fingers brushing against his chin, as though weighing the significance of what he's uncovered. He's explained the purpose of case studies to me before. They're intensive investigations of a single unit, an individual, a group, an event. Holmes likens them to peeling back layers of an onion. With each layer, Watson, we uncover something deeper, something richer, he said once. It's this depth that fascinates him, the ability to move beyond surface-level understanding to uncover the full complexity of a subject. Holmes picks up another set of notes, this one filled with references to legal precedents. I can see the focus in his eyes as he connects the dots. Applications in legal research. That's what he's exploring now. He once told me that case studies are invaluable for understanding legal history, examining the evolution of doctrines, the reasoning behind judicial decisions, the impact of laws on society. Every landmark case, Watson, is a story, he said, one that shapes the future as much as it reflects the past. Watching him now, I see that he's not just researching, he's piecing together a narrative that spans years, even decades. He pauses, reaching for his notebook and jotting down a series of observations. His handwriting is precise, his thoughts flowing effortlessly onto the page. Holmes is meticulous about his methods. He relies on a mix of internal sources, documents, records, written accounts, and external ones like interviews and observations. He calls it triangulation, a term I've come to appreciate. By employing multiple methods, he ensures that his findings are credible and trustworthy. One source can lie, Watson, he said, but three? That's where the truth begins to emerge. He sets down his pen and glances out the window for a moment. His expression thoughtful. I know that look. It's the moment before clarity strikes, when all the pieces are just about to fall into place. And then there's his insistence on methodological rigor. Holmes is uncompromising in this regard. To him, clarity and structure are essential. Without them, even the most thorough case study risks falling into speculation. Precision, Watson, he said, is the difference between insight and assumption. It's a principle he lives by, and one I've come to respect deeply. I lean back in my chair, watching as he returns to his work, his focus unwavering. There's a kind of beauty in his process, a blend of curiosity, discipline, and intuition that few can match. Case studies are Holmes's playground, his canvas. They allow him to delve into the intricacies of a single case, to explore its every facet, its every implication. To most, they're just research tools, but to Holmes, they're much more. They're the keys to understanding, the foundation upon which justice is built. The rain continues to fall as Holmes bends over his notes once more, his pen scratching against the paper. I sip my tea, content to observe, knowing that when he's ready, he'll share the brilliance of what he's uncovered. For now, I can only marvel at the genius before me. The lamplight casts a warm glow over 221B Baker Street, illuminating the scattered papers and charts on Holmes's desk. I sit quietly, observing him as he pores over the results of yet another survey. His fingers tap rhythmically against the table, his eyes scanning the rows of data with laser-like focus. I've seen this before. Holmes is in the zone, chasing insights hidden beneath the surface. Surveys. To most, they're just questions on a page designed to collect simple answers, but to Holmes, they're so much more. He calls them a mirror, reflecting the collective thoughts, opinions, and behaviors of the people they reach. And as I watch him now, I can see how deeply he values this tool. Holmes picks up a chart, his lips curling into a faint smile. I recognize that look. He's found something, a detail that others might have overlooked. He once explained the purpose of surveys to me in his usual precise manner. "Watson," he said, "surveys help us understand perceptions. They gauge public sentiment, track trends, and most importantly, inform policy. In the world of legal research, they're not just useful, they're indispensable. Policy development," he told me, "is built on these foundations. Without understanding the people's perspective, the law cannot truly serve them." He moves on to another page, his pen flying across the paper as he jots down observations. The structure of the survey fascinates him, each component a piece of the larger puzzle. He categorizes them meticulously, starting with probability samples, designed to ensure every member of a population has an equal chance of being represented. "These, Watson," he said, "are the gold standard. They offer accuracy, reliability, and a clear picture of the population. Then there are non-probability samples, which, while less rigid, allow for quick insights. Holmes uses these sparingly, understanding their limitations but appreciating their speed." He pauses, running his finger along a row of data points, his expression thoughtful. "Cross-sectional surveys," he calls them, "a snapshot in time, capturing public opinion as it stands in the moment." He often likens them to a photograph, useful for seeing where things are but not where they're going. For that, he turns to longitudinal surveys. These are his favorite, tracking changes over time, revealing the evolution of attitudes and opinions. "Trends, Watson," he said once, "are the heartbeat of society, and surveys are the stethoscope." I must admit, I never thought of it that way until now. Holmes picks up a new page, examining it closely. His pen hovers for a moment before finally making a note in the margin. The components of a survey are no less important to him. A carefully chosen sample ensures the data is representative. The design of the questionnaire determines its effectiveness, its ability to capture meaningful responses. And then there's the method of data collection. Online platforms, face-to-face interviews, even mailed questionnaires. Holmes evaluates each option with the precision of a surgeon, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of every approach. I sip my tea, marveling at his ability to make sense of it all. To me, it's just rows of numbers and words. To him, it's a map, a guide to understanding the human experience. "Surveys," Holmes once said, "are like listening to a symphony. Each response is a note, and together they form a melody, a story of what people think, feel, and believe." It's not just data to him, it's insight, a way to see the world as it is and as it might become. The room grows quiet as Holmes leans back in his chair, his notebook filled with observations. He doesn't speak, but I can see the satisfaction in his eyes. The survey has told its story, and Holmes, as always, has heard every word. As he returns to his work, I find myself reflecting on the depth of his process. It's not just about the questions, it's about the answers, the patterns, the truths hidden between the lines. And no one reads between the lines better than Sherlock Holmes. The hum of distant traffic outside is faint compared to the quiet crackle of the fire in the hearth. Holmes sits with a peculiar device in his hand, a sleek, modern tablet, its screen glowing faintly in the dim light of 221B Baker Street. I watch as his fingers move across the screen with surprising ease for a man so rooted in traditional methods. But then again, Holmes has always been a man of contradictions. Technology, it's not a word I've often associated with Holmes, and yet here he is, embracing it with the same precision and intensity he applies to everything else. He once told me, "The tools may change, Watson, but the pursuit of truth remains the same." And today, That pursuit is powered by technology. He taps the screen, scrolling through the results of an online survey. I lean forward slightly, curious about what's caught his attention. Online surveys, he explained to me once, are revolutionary. They allow researchers to reach a vast audience, gathering public opinion on legal topics with remarkable speed. Social media platforms, legal forums, even dedicated survey websites. Each is a doorway into the minds of the people. The wider the net, Watson, he said, the clearer the picture. Watching him now, I see how much he values their efficiency, their ability to collect data from far beyond the confines of London. Holmes sets the tablet down and picks up his mobile phone, its screen lighting up as he opens another app. I recognize the faint flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. It's a look I've seen many times before. Mobile data collection apps are his latest fascination. Designed for smartphones and tablets, these tools capture everything from survey responses to GPS location data, even audio and video recordings. Imagine, Watson, he said, being able to collect evidence in real time from anywhere in the world. It's as if the entire planet has become our crime scene. The depth of data these apps provide is unparalleled, and Holmes uses them with the same meticulous care he applies to his magnifying glass. He pauses, glancing at a small device on the edge of the desk. It looks unassuming, but I've learned better than to judge by appearances. Sensor-based data collection, he called it. These devices, he explained, can capture physical interactions, behaviors, even subtle changes in the environment. In courtrooms, they monitor attorney-client interactions or the demeanor of witnesses. The smallest detail, Watson, he said, can speak volumes if you know how to listen. Watching him now, I can see how these tools fit seamlessly into his method, augmenting his observations, enhancing his insights. Holmes leans back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. He's not just thinking, he's projecting, imagining the future of these technologies. He spoke recently of their advantages: increased efficiency, standardized methods, enhanced accuracy. These tools transform data collection, making it faster, more reliable, more precise. And yet, as always, Holmes sees beyond the present. He talks of artificial intelligence and virtual reality, of a world where advanced algorithms analyze legal documents and simulations recreate courtroom scenarios. The future, Watson, he said, is not something to fear. It's something to prepare for. I sit quietly, absorbing it all. To me, these tools are remarkable but overwhelming. To Holmes, they're simply the next step in his lifelong pursuit of truth. Technology has not replaced his intuition, nor has it diminished his reliance on traditional methods. Instead, it has amplified them, providing new ways to uncover the hidden, to understand the complex, to solve the unsolvable. And as I watch him now, I realize that Holmes is not just a man of his time, he's a man ahead of it. The scene fades with Holmes returning to his work, the faint glow of the tablet illuminating his face. I sip my tea, marveling at the seamless blend of old and new in his hands, and silently grateful to witness the evolution of his craft. The room is unusually quiet, save for the faint scratching of Holmes's pen against paper. A single document rests on the desk, its title catching my eye: Ethical Frameworks in Data Collection. Holmes's expression is uncharacteristically somber as he writes, his usual sharp energy tempered by a sense of gravity. Ethics. It's not a word often associated with the relentless pursuit of truth, but for Holmes, it's non-negotiable. Watson, he said once, the ends do not justify the means, not in science, not in law, and certainly not in research. Today, I see him wrestling with that very principle, laying out the foundations of what he considers the cornerstone of credible data collection. Holmes pauses, his pen hovering above the paper as though weighing the weight of the words he's about to write. I can tell he's thinking about informed consent, a topic he's spoken about at length before. Informed consent, he told me once, is the bedrock of ethical research. Without it, everything crumbles. He insists that participants must know exactly what they're agreeing to, what the research entails, the potential risks, the benefits, and most importantly, their right to withdraw at any time. Watson, he said, if a person doesn't freely give their trust, how can we freely take their information? Watching him now, I see how deeply he believes it. He sets down his pen and reaches for a book, a thick, worn volume on privacy laws. As he flips through its pages, his expression hardens slightly, as though bracing himself for the complexities within. Privacy and confidentiality. To Holmes, these are not just legal requirements, they're moral imperatives. He once explained to me the importance of anonymizing data, especially in today's age of social media and digital records. People's lives, Watson, are not just data points. Their stories deserve to be protected. He often recounts cases where the careless handling of sensitive information caused irreparable harm. It's a responsibility he takes seriously, ensuring that the identities of participants remain secure, their trust unbroken. Holmes glances at a small note he's pinned to the corner of his desk. It reads, "Trust is earned, not assumed." I've seen him glance at it many times, particularly when grappling with ethical dilemmas. He's always spoken of the delicate balance between research and respect. To him, ethics are not a hindrance, they're a guide, a way to ensure that the pursuit of truth does not come at the expense of humanity. "The truth, Watson," he once said, "is not worth finding if it means losing our integrity along the way." I've carried those words with me ever since. Holmes leans back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. His gaze is distant, thoughtful, as though contemplating not just the research before him, but the larger implications of his work. Ethical considerations, he explained to me recently, are not just about compliance, they're about trust. Trust in the researcher, trust in the process, trust in the findings. Without it, research loses its value, its credibility, its very purpose. And Holmes, for all his brilliance, understands that trust is as fragile as it is vital. The fire crackles softly in the background as Holmes picks up his pen once more, resuming his notes. I sit quietly, reflecting on the weight of what he's said. Ethics, I realize, are not just rules. They're a commitment, a promise to honor the people whose lives intersect with our work. As I watch Holmes, I can't help but feel a deep sense of respect, not just for his mind, but for his heart. He doesn't just seek the truth. He seeks to find it responsibly, ethically, humanely, and that, perhaps more than anything, is what sets him apart. The rain has stopped, leaving the streets of London glistening under the soft glow of gas lamps. Inside 221B Baker Street, the atmosphere is heavy with focus. Holmes is seated at his desk, surrounded by a sea of papers, charts, and survey designs. His magnifying glass lies discarded to the side. This is a different kind of case, one that doesn't require footprints or fingerprints. It requires precision, clarity, and an unyielding dedication to the truth. Reliability and validity. To most, they're abstract concepts, the kind of terms tossed around in academic papers without much thought. But to Holmes, they're the cornerstone of any meaningful investigation. "Watson," he told me once, "if our data is flawed, our conclusions are worthless. Reliability ensures consistency. Validity ensures truth. Without them, we're navigating in the dark." Holmes picks up a poorly designed survey, his lips tightening in mild disdain. He holds it up as though it's an example of everything that could go wrong in research. Reliability? It's about trustworthiness, about ensuring that a method produces consistent results time and again. Holmes has likened it to a clock. If it doesn't keep time accurately, it's of no use. He once showed me how poorly worded questions can lead to unreliable data, how ambiguous phrasing confuses respondents and muddles the results. The devil, Watson, he said, is in the details. To him, piloting surveys with small groups is essential, a way to test the waters, to ensure every question is clear, every answer meaningful. He sets the survey aside and reaches for a different stack of papers, this one marked with annotations in his precise handwriting. His gaze sharpens as he studies the notes, his pen tapping thoughtfully against the desk. Validity. If reliability is the clock, validity is the compass. It ensures that the data we collect actually measures what it claims to measure. Holmes has a particular disdain for leading questions, the kind that steer respondents toward a predetermined answer. A valid question, he told me, is like an open door. It invites the truth in, without agenda or bias. Watching him now, I see how carefully he designs his methods, ensuring every element is aligned with his pursuit of genuine understanding. Holmes leans back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his gaze distant. I can tell he's thinking about the ethical implications of it all, a topic he never takes lightly. Ethics, he explained to me recently, are as integral to reliability and validity as the methods themselves. Without informed consent, without transparency, the data loses its integrity. Watson, he said, honesty isn't just a virtue, it's a necessity. Without it, the foundation of our work crumbles. He ensures participants understand exactly how their data will be used, building trust and fostering honest responses. To Holmes, this isn't just good practice, it's the only practice. I watch as he turns his attention to a final document, one outlining the broader implications of his findings. His expression softens slightly, the hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Legal research, Holmes once said, is a living thing. It evolves, adapts, grows. The reliability and validity of our methods determine its strength, its ability to withstand scrutiny and guide progress. By incorporating diverse data collection techniques and technological tools, we can address the challenges of today and prepare for those of tomorrow. To Holmes, this isn't just theory, it's a vision, a commitment to the future of justice. The fire crackles softly as Holmes sets down his pen, his notes complete. I sit quietly, reflecting on all I've observed. Reliability, validity, ethics, they're more than just concepts to Holmes. They're the guiding principles of his work, the standards he holds himself to, and the legacy he hopes to leave behind. As I watch him, I realize once again the depth of his brilliance. Holmes doesn't just solve mysteries, he ensures that the solutions are sound, credible, and rooted in truth. And in doing so, he reminds me that even in the pursuit of answers, it's the questions we ask and how we ask them that matter most. The room is quiet, the fire in the hearth casting a soft glow across Holmes's desk. Instead of his usual stack of yellowed papers and dog-eared notebooks, a sleek tablet sits before him. The graphs and charts on its screen illuminate his sharp features as he leans forward, deep in thought. I sit nearby, as always, marveling at his ability to embrace the tools of tomorrow without abandoning the principles of yesterday. The future, it's a concept that seems both daunting and exhilarating, and yet Holmes approaches it with the same measured confidence he applies to everything. Watson, he said recently, the future of legal research doesn't belong to those who merely collect data, it belongs to those who know how to wield it. Today, I see him wrestling with the implications of that statement, mapping out a world transformed by technology and innovation. Holmes swipes across the tablet, bringing up a detailed chart filled with figures and annotations. I lean closer, trying to decipher what he's found. Big data and legal analytics. Holmes often speaks of these as the backbone of modern research. The vast troves of legal documents, court records, and even social media data are no longer obstacles, they're opportunities. The challenge, Watson, he explained, isn't in finding the data, it's in making sense of it. Watching him now, I see how his mind works, slicing through the complexity, uncovering the patterns and insights hidden within the noise. He pauses for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he contemplates something unseen. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he pulls up another screen. This one is filled with diagrams of artificial intelligence, algorithms, and virtual reality simulations. The integration of technology. To Holmes, this is where the future truly takes shape. Artificial intelligence tools, he says, will revolutionize legal research, analyzing vast data sets in moments, identifying relevant case law, even predicting the outcomes of trials, and virtual reality. Imagine, Watson, he said once, a courtroom recreated down to the smallest detail, a training ground for lawyers and researchers alike. It's a vision as ambitious as it is precise, and I can see how deeply he believes in its potential. He picks up a notebook, its pages filled with his sharp, meticulous handwriting. On one page, he's written a single word in bold letters: accessibility. Holmes speaks often of the democratization of knowledge. These technologies, he says, won't just make research faster or more accurate, they'll make it more accessible. Mobile applications, wearable sensors, real-time data collection. These tools will put the power of legal research into the hands of those who need it most, breaking down barriers of geography, language, and resources. As he sets the notebook aside, I notice a faint smile on his lips. It's a rare expression, one that speaks of quiet satisfaction and hope. The implications of all this, Holmes once told me, are profound. The future of data collection isn't just about efficiency, it's about justice. It's about ensuring that every case, every precedent, every decision is grounded in the best possible evidence. And as I watch him now, I realize that Holmes isn't just preparing for the future, he's shaping it, building the foundations of a new era in legal research. The fire crackles softly as Holmes leans back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the glowing screen before him. I sit in silence, humbled by the breadth of his vision and the depth of his commitment. To most, the future is uncertain, a thing to be feared or avoided. But to Holmes, it's a puzzle waiting to be solved, a challenge to be met with intelligence, creativity, and unwavering purpose. And as I watch him now, I can't help but feel grateful to witness it all. A man standing at the crossroads of tradition and innovation, lighting the way forward for all of us. The room feels quiet, almost contemplative, as Holmes sits at his desk, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Before him, an arrangement of notes and diagrams, each one meticulously outlining the various methods of data collection. It's as though he's orchestrating a symphony of techniques, each note an instrument essential to the harmony of the whole. I sit nearby, watching, reflecting on all I've seen and learned during this case. Data collection. To Holmes, it's not just a process, it's an art. Each technique, each method is a tool, a thread in a tapestry that weaves together the truth. Watching him now, I marvel at his ability to navigate these methods with such precision, such clarity. He sees not just the details, but how they connect, how they build toward the larger picture. Holmes reaches for a notebook, flipping through pages filled with his sharp, precise handwriting. On one page, he's listed the first technique, observation. Observation, he once told me, is where it all begins. To see, Watson, truly see, that is the foundation of every investigation. He divides observation into three types: participating, quasi-participating, and non-participating. Participating immerses the researcher in the environment, while quasi-participating strikes a balance between involvement and detachment. Non-participating, his favorite, allows for pure objectivity, watching without interfering. The world, he said, reveals itself to those who pay attention. He sets the notebook down and picks up a stack of papers, transcripts of interviews. His pen hovers over them, underlining a key phrase as he reflects on their importance. Interviews. To Holmes, they're more than conversations. They're dialogues of discovery. Structured interviews provide consistency, while unstructured ones open the door to deeper insights. Every word, Watson, he told me once, every hesitation, every inflection, it all matters. Watching him work, I see how he uses each response like a thread, weaving it into the larger narrative of his investigation. Next, his attention shifts to a set of completed questionnaires. He sifts through them, his sharp eyes scanning for patterns, anomalies, connections. Questionnaires, he said recently, are the workhorses of data collection. Efficient, standardized, anonymous. They gather the broad strokes of public opinion, but their depth is limited, and their completion rates unpredictable. They're a map, Watson, he explained, but not the journey itself. Still, they serve their purpose, capturing the pulse of the population with remarkable speed and scale. Holmes moves to another document, this one a detailed case study. He studies it carefully, his expression one of intense focus. Case studies, he said, are where the complexity lies. They delve into the unique, the specific, the singular. Through them, we understand not just what happened, but why. Whether it's legal history, judicial decisions, or the impact of laws, case studies provide the depth that other methods often lack. They're the lens, Watson, he said, through which we see the intricacies of human behavior and decision-making. Finally, he turns to a set of surveys, their data organized into neat charts and graphs. His pen taps rhythmically against the desk as he reviews them. Surveys, he once explained, are the bridge between individual insight and collective understanding. They track trends, gauge public opinion, and reveal shifts in attitudes over time. Watson, he said, a well-designed survey doesn't just ask questions, it answers them too. Watching him now, I see how he uses them to bring clarity to the larger patterns of society, the movements of thought and belief. Holmes leans back in his chair, his gaze distant yet focused. I can see the satisfaction in his expression, the quiet confidence of a man who has brought order to complexity. Each technique, he said, has its strengths and weaknesses. Observation reveals what's hidden. Interviews uncover what's unspoken. Questionnaires gather the masses, case studies dive into the depths, and surveys paint the trends of time. Together, they form a complete picture, a tapestry of truth that guides us toward understanding. The fire crackles softly as Holmes sets his notes aside, his work for the evening complete. I sit in silence, reflecting on the journey we've undertaken together, the techniques we've explored, the insights we've uncovered. To most, data collection is just a task, a means to an end. But to Holmes, it's a calling, a way to illuminate the unknown, to find meaning in the chaos. And as I sit here watching him with quiet admiration, I realize that this is more than just a case. It's a testament to the power of inquiry, the pursuit of truth, and the unyielding brilliance of Sherlock Holmes. The fire in the hearth flickers low, casting long shadows across the room. Holmes leans back in his chair, his work neatly organized before him, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. I glance at him, then at the notes and charts that tell the story of his relentless pursuit of understanding. It's a moment of reflection, one that lingers like the fading warmth of the evening. And so, dear friends, we come to the end of this journey. From observation to surveys, from case studies to the future of technology, we've explored the intricate dance of data collection and research. But remember, this is not just Holmes's pursuit, it's yours too. The tools and techniques we've shared are keys ready to unlock your own insights, your own breakthroughs. Holmes glances at me with a knowing smile as if to say the next step is mine, and so I turn to you, our fellow seekers of truth. If you've enjoyed this exploration, I urge you, hit the subscribe button, share this with others who hunger for knowledge, like and comment to let us know your thoughts, your questions, your own stories of discovery. Together, we build a community of minds inspired by the pursuit of truth and the brilliance of Sherlock Holmes. The scene fades, the fire dimming as Holmes returns to his work. I smile, knowing this is only the beginning of many more investigations to come.